Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. Today I want to talk about a platformer I really enjoyed and really hated at the exact same time, mostly because I was going for full completion and it was an absolute nightmare. I'm talking about Sackboy: A Big Adventure. Now, I really love the LittleBigPlanet franchise. I played the original ones on the PlayStation. PlayStation Vita 1 is one of my favorite titles of all time. It's so much fun. I love how ingenious the franchise is. And so when they kind of rebranded or rebranched off into Sackboy: A Big Adventure, made it less about the creation, more about the platforming, and more about the journey, I was intrigued and I thought it looked really fun, so I decided I'd get it. And I had a great time for the most part. Now, this is very much like a LittleBigPlanet game. There's a lot of fun, fancy craft world stuff to go over. Everything is hand knitted or has that craft feeling about it, which is really fantastic. It's really charming. I love that about the LittleBigPlanet franchise. But this time, you have a really kind of deep story as well. You are joining the Knitted Knights to try and save the world from the uproar, which is something that threatens to take over Craft World and take over everything that you love. And you're going against this big evil baddie, this jester that's constantly berating you and capturing the people of Craft World and stopping you at every turn. He's actually quite terrifying for a kids game villain. He's pretty scary and pretty prevalent throughout the entirety of the experience. I showed my daughter a few times some of the boss fights, and she was really scared of Vex. He was just kind of a scary guy. And some of the visuals can be a little bit more on the adult side a little bit. But overall, this game is really charming and kid-friendly. It's very fun. I really enjoy the platforming elements of the game. 3D platforming can be tricky to get sometimes, especially when you're doing something like almost a top-down or a side-scroller type thing. It kind of marries those two at different points. It can be difficult to nail the depth the three dimensions, making it so that when you're going from platform to platform, you have a clear idea of where you're going to land. But it actually pulls this off very, very well. You have lots of options in the air. You can do like a little flutter jump, kind of like Yoshi does, to hold yourself in the air for a little bit. You can also punch in the air to stall. You can do like a ground pound thing. You can also do a dive. So in the air, you have options to like stall for quite a bit of time. You can jump, you can flutter, you can punch, and you can dive. And then if you really need that extra stall, you can do a ground pound right before you hit the ground, which gives you a lot of maneuverability in some of the tricky platforming sections. And this game can be extremely tricky. If you're going for all the extra path things, all of the different collectibles, the orbs that you need to get to progress the story, or just the extra like stickers and stuff, the costume items, getting the coins for the buying costumes in the costume shop, you're going to really need to hone your platforming skills. This game gets very difficult pretty quickly, honestly. There's a lot of extra challenge that you can find in each level, and as the game progresses, it gets substantially harder. This game also introduces a two-player mechanic. Some of the levels are two-player only, which means you have to bring somebody else with you. You can just pair in another controller, but typically you're going to need to utilize teamwork in order to pass the level. I found this extremely frustrating from a completionist standpoint. Trying to get the platinum trophy on this was really difficult because I needed a friend to do a lot of the stuff with me. I finally got my daughter to practice enough with me. She got pretty good at doing a lot of the things. This game's pretty advanced, but she did a really good job. A couple levels were too hard, and I had to do two controllers at once to pass those levels, and it was ridiculous. It took a long time, but I pulled it off. I don't know how, but it works. It's not my favorite element. It is very cool. I wish it didn't count toward the completion, especially the trophies. If the two-player mechanic didn't count toward trophies, I would have a much better opinion of it because it's really fun. The levels that you do play are really engaging, really interesting, and the way that you utilize like throwing your friend up to higher platforms is awesome. But I would have appreciated that being relegated to something else instead of trophy related. There's also random trophies throughout the game, like holding one of the pinata things that lets hornets come out. You have to hold it for like 60 seconds without getting hit. That one's kind of annoying, but fun at the same time. There's a lot of those little nitpicky trophies that you wouldn't just accomplish on your own. So it can be frustrating if you're getting near the end and you're like, man, I still have a lot of trophies to go. And you check the trophy list and you go, oh, there's a bunch of stuff I need to do that's just kind of random. So if you're going for a full completion, I would say use a trophy guide from the beginning. That way you can check off some of the more like menial trophies that take a little bit of extra time or something going out of your way from the main story. excuse me, to make sure that you are keeping up with all the trophies, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you're just talking about the main story, the levels are really well crafted throughout the entirety of this experience. They're really well done. I think the enemy placement is really great. Some of the enemies you can just jump on their heads. Some of them you can punch and knock them around. You can throw them off edges. Some of them have like long range attacks. Some of them have armor on them. You have to utilize your skills and your knowledge of the game in order to take down these various enemies. And I think it's really fantastic what they do. The boss fights are really unique and interesting. They typically don't utilize the same formula over and over, which is nice. They're not super hard until the later stages of the boss fights, but they are fairly unique and fairly varied, and I had a good time with them. There's also Knitted Night challenges. They're like speedrun-esque things that you need to do. You can collect clocks along the way in each of these challenges to lower your time. You have to beat a certain time to get the gold medal and get all the orbs that you need. And the final one is a gauntlet where you have to run like everything, and it's ridiculous. It's so long and so hard, and it was super enjoyable to finally check that one off and get it done. I quite enjoyed the Knitted Night challenges. There's a nice extra bonus for unlocking and exploring the world extra. I like that. The game does reward you for exploring and getting more of the completion things done, and I enjoy that aspect of it a lot. Now, like I said earlier, there is a lot of difficulty in this game. So some of the platforming sections are really too difficult at times. They feel almost RNG-ish with the way that enemies react to you. Sometimes it feels like the platforms don't move the way that you expect them to. They're not always consistent. There are some things that can be really frustrating. And typically I found that to be the case in the 2-player challenges exclusively. So I think for the most part, this game mechanically is very tight and works exactly how you would expect it to. And honestly, like using 3 dimensions, my depth perception isn't very great at a lot of games. I like having like a shadow underneath you to give you an idea of where you're going to land. Sackboy like handles that extremely well. I almost never missed my target because it puts you in the place where you can see your shadow, you can tell exactly where you're going to land every time, and it makes sense in my brain. So I think the physics of this game work fantastic. It's also a very big game. They didn't lie when they said Sackboy's big adventure. There's a lot of worlds. There's a lot of levels to explore. Lots of secrets to find, too, to find hidden levels, to find these extra collectibles. You need to get the orbs, the main collectible, to progress the story because everything is locked off by the uproar. He's constantly pushing you away. So if you get enough orbs, you can progress the path and keep moving forward. So sometimes you have to go out of your way to get extra orbs. Usually they're easy to find. Sometimes they're a little bit more difficult. They're a challenge throughout the level. Sometimes they're just a single one that you find hidden in the ground. Other times they're segmented into shards to get a single orb. I like what they do with this game. I think the collectibles work exceptionally well. For a 3D platformer and for someone that likes collectibles in a game, I think they handle it extremely well. And getting to the very end of the game, it's very satisfying. Beating the final boss actually triggers like a whole extra couple levels that you get to fight the true final boss. I like that kind of twist at the end of the game. The story, like I said, is pretty fantastic from start to finish. It's a little more adult oriented, so you have like some higher stakes. It makes Sackboy feel like a real, true, like protagonist in this story, that he's growing and learning and becoming this knight that you need him to be. And I think that's really fantastic. One other element that I really love, they incorporate music into almost every level, if not every single level. Some of the times where you're like getting into a little flower that launches you into a new section, it will sync it up to the music that's in the background, and then it will shoot you at a specific time. Enemies will react to the music, the environment reacts to the music. It's really, really cool how they incorporate stuff like Uptown Funk into a level and make it feel just really natural and fun. They utilize this throughout the entirety of the game, and I think it's done exceptionally well. If it weren't for a lot of these extra aspects that kind of frustrated me, the 2-player mode and some of like the really ridiculous platforming or the really long-winded platforming sections, or some of the levels to get full completion you need to beat it without dying a single time, which can be extremely difficult for some things, including the boss runs. There are some random trophies that you have to do a 2-player boss fight without dying. Some of that stuff is just too hard. Getting all the collectibles is no big deal. Sometimes they're out of the way, sometimes they're hard to find. I can manage with that. But getting a deathless run can be really difficult, especially, like I said, for those long levels or for the boss fights that were particularly egregious. So getting those things was frustrating, but everything else, honestly, I had a really fun time. It was a nice return to form. I think LittleBigPlanet 3 was kind of a departure. It wasn't the best LittleBigPlanet game. It got like mediocre reviews. Sackboy got much better reviews, and I really enjoyed it. It felt more like a LittleBigPlanet game to me, and that's exactly what you want out of this franchise. I'm going to give Sackboy a Big Adventure a gold ranking, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.